Hey everybody, and welcome back to a new video. In this video, I have a special guest, and we're going to talk about the unique opportunity that comes from using long lenses for telephoto landscape photography. It presents a new opportunity to find new ways to do landscape photography, and I'm joined by the best in the business, Thomas Heaton, that I'm here in Svalbard with. We've been photographing polar bears and walruses, and of course, beautiful, majestic landscapes. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you. What a generous introduction, best in the business. I'm not sure, I'll take it, but I'm not sure it's true.
Well, he's much better than I am, and we've been having fun on this trip, playing with genres and maybe trading off. He's picked up an interest in wildlife photography, and I've been honing my skills, looking over his shoulder for improving my landscape photography. So, what are your thoughts so far on this trip?
Well, the trip's been fantastic. It's been an eye-opener, as I've discussed many times with you and the guests on this trip. I have transitioned from landscape into wildlife photography, it's so much fun. It's completely different to landscapes. Way faster action, real kind of high energy photography. You know, they'll sit around for a long time doing nothing, and then you get a short opportunity of perhaps sometimes even 10 seconds. Sometimes you're lucky and have a couple of minutes. And bang, 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 and it's exciting. You never know what you're going to get. And I've been applying my landscape skills / style to my wildlife shots, and it feels exciting. It feels like a new, actually, to be honest, it feels like a new genre of landscape photography, because I'm shooting these abstract landscapes, but with wildlife in them. I love it.
Which is a best practice in wildlife photography, to get some environment and some scene behind it. And of course, majestic, mountainous, snowy landscape peaks in the background is great for us to use.
I mean, this is, if you're ever going to do that, this is the location to do it, right? It makes things a lot easier.
So the conversation I want to have specifically to pick Thomas's brain is a subset of landscape photography, and that is using long telephoto lenses. We've been making good use of 100 to 400 lenses, and other people may be using 70 to 200s. Because we're surrounded by beautiful mountainous landscape all around us. And while we're on the ship, the ability to hone in on something in the distance and get landscape shots that way has been part of what we've been doing. So, Thomas, walk us through what you think is, how is a telephoto landscape shot different than what we're used to using wide-angle lenses for?
It's completely different. It changes the way you look at the landscape. Typically, you would expect landscape photography to be wide angle, find a foreground, match that foreground with a mountainous background, for example, and you get this broad sweeping landscape, which is amazing. However, if you're using a long lens, then that broad landscape that perhaps with a 16mm lens, you would maybe have 1 or 2 compositions. With a long lens, from the same spot, you've now got 10 compositions. You can really dissect the landscape, pull out those vignettes. You can also pull the landscape to you. So you can reach out, grab it, and pull it in and make fantastic frames.
Talking of pulling the landscape to you, what do you think is the look of a telephoto landscape shot? And can you pick one out of the crowd, looking at various scenes and various photos of the ones taken with a telephoto lens versus a wide angle lens?
Yes. Absolutely. You get this compression with a telephoto lens, which just can emphasize drama within a scene. So if you have mountain ridges, for example, and you reach in and pull those out of the landscape with a long lens, the compression that you get just gives you a fantastic sense of scale. Like, it's difficult to articulate, but if you photograph mountains with a wide angle lens, then typically those mountains are actually going to look really small, because your wide angle lens is pushing them far away. With the telephoto lens, the opposite happens. You pull them towards you. So you can have trees in the somewhat mid-ground, mountains in the background, and using that compression, then you can really show the scale of the landscape.
All right. The scale is a problem. Shooting those glaciers we were looking at, without someone or a boat in the scene, they could be 5 meters tall or 50 meters tall. Do you have any tricks, or what do you think about ways to get scale in some of these where there's kind of nothing in the foreground?
Yeah, scale is it's an important thing to think about. I don't worry about it too much, because I often look at my landscapes more so in shapes and patterns. So when I take a photograph of, let's just say, a mountain, I'm not specifically thinking of the mountain as that's a mountain. I'm seeing it as geometric shapes. It's much more abstract. But sometimes it is good to have scale. So any kind of recognizable object that we can relate to, a person, an animal, a tree is a good one, the moon, these types of things really show the scale of the bigger thing in the picture, such as glaciers that we would shoot. If you shoot the front of a glacier, there's a tiny bird flying across the front of it, there's your scale.
That's right.
Yeah.
What tricks or tips do you have for someone who's trying to take this on for the first time? They're used to shooting landscapes with wide-angle lenses. They decide to take a 70-200 or 100-400 lens out for a landscape shoot. What practical tips do you have for someone to help them just orient their brain to think differently around landscapes?
Yeah, to think differently with the long lens. I would say it can be overwhelming because you're looking around and there's so much 360-degree view. There's everything. So rather than think about what you can put in your frame, think about actually what you can exclude from your frame. What don't you want in your photograph? Oh, that ugly fence, that car, that building, that bit of rock that's just flat and black. You don't want that. So by thinking about what you want to eliminate from your picture, you can strip it back to the elements that really excite you. Typically, with a long lens, I will follow the light. So if you have light coming through the clouds and hitting a portion of the landscape, follow that. Go with the light with long lens photography. Go with the light, go with the atmosphere. If there's mist and fog rolling over a bit of the mountain, go in there. And don't look at it from a broad view. Think about how that can look if you just isolate a tiny, tiny bit of the landscape. And you can be very creative with it.
Yeah, I agree. That's where I tend to use this strategy with the lenses the most, with long lenses, is shooting a waterfall and the bottom of the waterfall just looks awful. So you go in and find little parts of the waterfall that are attractive on their own and try to exclude things that aren't adding to the photo or are just messy sometimes. Speaking of light and so on you're mentioning, what kind of conditions do you find lend themselves well to pulling out the telephoto lens in terms of atmospheric conditions or weather or scenes where it just works best?
For me, the best conditions for long lens photography is, as you mentioned, atmospheric. So you want sunshine and cloud, because as the cloud moves over and blocks the sunlight and shifts the rays of light, then it's a dynamic landscape. It's changing. 1 minute, there's not an image. It's socked in, there's too much cloud. 10 minutes later, the sun comes out, highlights a bit of the mountain, and perhaps a mountain ridge going off into the distance, a bit of mist coming over, there's a shot there. It's just a changeable landscape is what's going to be beneficial for long lens photography. Don't go out on a blue sky day, because typically you might struggle.
Yeah. I find where I struggle is in finding the composition. So first, when you arrive here, it's beautiful mountains, and you think, oh, that's beautiful. Then after a week, there's mountains everywhere.
Yeah.
Trying to carve out the composition out of the scene and trying to frame it. I find it's easier to do it wide scale, and sometimes I'll take my camera, put it on live view, but not for telephoto, but with wide angle landscapes. I'll put my camera in live view and walk around with my camera where I can see the composition on the back LCD. That strategy doesn't work for me with a telephoto lens. How do you help frame up the composition and try to find them amongst all the kind of chaos of beautiful mountains?
So aside from just following the light and following the atmospheric conditions, I always look for visual weight and balance. So I have that in mind. So I frame up something that's interesting, and just because it's interesting doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make a good composition. But if you frame up a piece of the landscape that you see as being interesting, and then you try and find the balance. You look at your frame and you think, okay, if this frame was a physical thing, would it tip over this way? Would it tip over this way? Is there one thing that's pulling my eye away from what's interesting? Perhaps a dark area that's too dark, or a hot spot that's too bright. So just keep in mind balance, visual weight. And if you have that in mind, then you'll probably succeed far more with your framing and composition.
That's great. And for gear, if people are looking to get into this for the first time and they're trying to struggle between 70-200, 100-400, fast lens, not that fast, do they have to worry about fast lenses? What are your recommendations for someone trying to pick up their first long lens that they want to? And of course, it's great they can serve dual purposes. You can shoot wildlife and other things as well. But what focal lengths or type of lens do you think is the most useful for most people?
Well, I mean, it depends on your budget. It also depends on how much you're willing to carry. My favorite lens is a 100-400. I feel that range from 1 to 4 is just, there's so many opportunities for photography with that focal range. But for a long time I shot with just a 70-200, which was much smaller and lighter. You don't need a fast lens. Now, the long lenses are sharpest at around f8, f9. Use a tripod for landscape photography anyway. So yeah, absolutely a fast lens. I mean, my 100-400, I believe, is f4.5 through to 5.6, something
same
like
as mine.
that. Yeah, so I don't stress.
And we're shooting it at f8.
Yeah,
or f7.1 or
always
f9.
f8, f9, yeah, f11 sometimes if I just need to push that depth of field a bit. So no, it really isn't important. It's not the same as wildlife where you might need that extra stop of light, because your tripod will give you that extra stop of light.
All right, great. Any final tips for people looking to maximize and maybe take their landscape photography to a new level by looking at using telephoto lenses to find new compositions or find new photos that were out of reach for them, literally out of reach, using wide angle lenses that are usually recommended for landscape photography?
Yeah, absolutely. Just get out. Just be outside. Always have your, if you have a long lens, always have it with you, because you can be in the most mundane environment, yet through the buildings, a bit of light is catching the distant mountain, go into 400, that is a shot. So you just constantly be aware, always be looking, build the habit of looking for compositions, and you'll become better and better and better at spotting those shots. So just keep practicing, have your long lens with you all the time, keep it in the back of your car, make sure it's insured in case someone steals it. And yeah, just get out and practice. You're never going to get great images unless you're out a lot, early, stay out late, you know. Really enjoy it. And also be okay with not getting a great image. You have to be okay with going on a photo shoot and not getting a great image. You should really be enjoying the process of being out. If you put too much pressure on yourself to come away with great images every time you go on a shoot, well, it just doesn't happen that often, you know? I mean, here it does because we're in Svalbard. Typically, you know, you need the right conditions. So enjoy being out and enjoy the process of looking. Don't rely too heavily on always getting a 5-star image, and you'll have a great time.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Thomas. It's been great having you.
You're welcome.
I've been very fortunate here to be joined by Thomas Heaton. I'll put a link to his channel. He's a great YouTuber and a great photographer. I'll put a link below in the show notes where people can find him and his work. And I hope you get the opportunity soon to go out with a long lens. I've shot landscapes with as much as 700 millimeters. I'll show you a photo of a crashing wave that I've done at that focal length. So any focal length can work for landscape photos, and especially long telephoto zooms are a great new piece of kit to put to your arsenal if you want to get into landscape photography and expand the bounds of what you're able to shoot. I hope you get to use this advice and go out the next time and get great photos. I know you can do it.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to say that.